I'll stop now and I won't scream like that the whole time. So thank you all for coming out. We're really happy to host this event. I'm Emily with Atlas Books with my coworkers Kate and Davis. I always say Davis and then Kate, and so I almost pointed at you and was like, Davis. So we are a cooperatively owned independent bookseller located here in Johnson City. We have our books over in the next room, and then we are also selling the books here tonight. You can come up and get those from us at the end of the event. We do take both cash and card, and there will be time for signing, so fear not. You can do all the things. There's never any better souvenir from a reading than a signed book, as my professor Jesse Graves always says. And we're happy to be here at the Generalist as well, and we're really thankful for them for letting us always have events here, and this is the coolest space ever, right? You know, it's just a good spot to be. So they have snacks, drinks, all sorts of things if you feel yourself becoming hungry or thirsty. Whenever you go to exit at the end of the evening, please go back out the doors that you came in and not that one. Go back out the front. And then the bathrooms are down the stairs and to your left. There's two of them. And then, yeah, make sure that you are respectful during the readings. We'll have the readers, then time for Q&A and signing. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about our readers for the night. So Kincaid Jenkins was born and raised in the South and has traveled the world at large. He has been an educator, a mentor, a traveler, an athlete, an artist, a purveyor of goods, a manager of people, an investigator, a treasure hunter, a student of life, a blue-collar worker, and an office drone, all unsuccessfully. This is my favorite bio.
It's all true. I left out Olympic hopeful athlete, but yeah, that's good too.
Also, another thing, he has won numerous writing and art contests and is a Pushcart Prize nominee for his work in the James Dickey Review. Call him Cade. His first book of poetry, Drinking with Others, was released last year. And then before I introduce Jeff, I would like to tell a little bit of a funny story about the first time we met. I host a poetry open mic every third Wednesday of the month at the Down Home at 7 p.m. And I received the list of readers, and I said, "Who is this man with the same first and last name as my father?" And I did not speak to him or say anything to him until I got up to introduce him. And I told this whole story about my dad, and I said, and that was my dad, Jeff Price. This isn't my dad, but this is Jeff Price. Isn't that a weird coincidence? Jeff Price is now in his 32nd year as an English teacher, 23 at Science Hill in Johnson City, and he also taught at Abingdon High School in Abingdon, Virginia, and Jefferson County High School in Dandridge, Tennessee. He just completed 38 years coaching wrestling on the high school, college, and middle school levels, and his career earned him a spot in the Tennessee chapter of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, and has included stops at Wagner High School in Louisville, Kentucky, Carson Newman College in Jefferson City, Abingdon High School, Jefferson County High School, Science Hill High School, and Liberty Bell Middle School in Johnson City. He currently resides here with his wife Julie, as well as a trio of cats, Merlin, Mister, and Cleo, and his boon companion, Doom and Buddy Dogs, the rescue dog who rescued him. We're here tonight to celebrate the publication of his book of poems, One Steady Glance, and now we can at last get into this really cool reading that we're about to hear. So please welcome our readers.
If I start thanking a lot of people, I'll probably leave somebody out, but I want to thank Emily because we've gone, and Emily, and we kept trying to nail down dates, and then a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, I ran into Brad cleaning his sidewalk on Sunday morning with the dog, so I walked over and he's like, he had it on his phone, he's like, "Look, I was going to call you today," and he actually had it to call Coach Price. So, spend money in this establishment, spend money down, thanks for doing this. I had a friend, and I have a friend, a lot of us, she's a friend of a lot of us, Jay Gervin, and Jay is, just had a double mastectomy. She's going through chemo, and I read poems to her, just some of my poems and other poems, and I sent them to her, and we talked last night, and it really looked like she was going to be able to make it, but I talked to Katie right before, and so she had gone to sleep, and so Katie said, "I'm not going to wake her up," which is fine. So I'm going to start by reading a poem that I wrote for Jay. And because and my brother's wife just died. They've been married 53 years. They just died, and she just died. And it's like, I have these people going through these horrendous things that I have no concept of what they would be, of what it's like. And so I wrote a poem for Jay that connects to how I feel for Bill, and it's called Sling Stones and Paper Cuts. It's one more for Jay. Epigraph. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. Job 1:1. I used to wonder how I had managed to escape my Book of Job moment. Then this physician healed himself. In an exercise that I set my kids on almost daily, I opened the book and the answer came to me in the first verse. Perfect and upright and one that feared God and eschewed evil. None of these adjectives apply to me. So it then made perfect sense. Why would old Scratch leave his going to and fro in the bowels of the earth and his walking up and down in it to bother with me? So my theory is this. He sends his shit to people who fit Job's profile. Though I would contend that burying a 16-year-old kid makes me a sort of Jimmy Conway on the edge of the inside, like some cut-rate St. Francis with an abstract grasp of your plight, but no real experience to offer that might mitigate the malaise of the fracas you find yourself in. But I'll tell you what, I'm still going to stand here like some vapid, oblivious git, clueless to exactly what it is you have to wake up to every day, some ditzy, dumbass David, slinging my words like little stones at your fear, uncertainty, and pain, shoulder to shoulder with all the rest who bring their bullets to your door, knowing that we can't one-shot a devil, but confident that we can kill the fucker by paper cut.
So I'll give you a little backstory on how this all came to be. It all started, the year was 1995. Everyone had long hair and flannel, the grunge scene was going on. Braveheart was about to win Best Picture, which is big because it's one of our favorite movies. And I met this guy, I was trying out for the soccer team, and he was the coach. He doesn't care about soccer at all, but I didn't know that. You were supposed to show up early in the morning to run. His ulterior motive, I think, was to recruit new wrestlers, which he ended up doing with me. And then I had him for English, and that's where I got introduced to poetry. And at the time, the only poetry I'd ever read was the stuff you're forced to read in school that's 500 years old, and it's about unrequited love and flowers, or the love of flowers and things like that. And he actually made it exciting. He introduced us to Langston Hughes and Walt Whitman and people like that, and James Dickey, which was big for me because he was a poet who was a fighter pilot and a college football player, and he wrote poetry, and I was like, that kind of blew my mind at the time. So for the past 25 years, been writing poetry just as a hobby. And then COVID hit, and I found myself working from home, and I was like, I need a new hobby because I'm kind of going nuts. So start writing more, and I'm also looking at local publishers, and I find one. And at the time, I was going to my favorite brewery in Morganton, North Carolina. If you ever there, go to Sidetrack Brewery. Really good brewery. They did my first book release. And I wrote something about that brewery, just about sitting at the bar talking to people. And I asked the owner, can I send you something? And it turns out he was a fan of writing. He didn't know that at the time. He was like, man, I really love this. Can I print this out and put it on the wall? I was like, you can do whatever you want to with it. But he kind of kicked my butt into, you need to submit this to places. So I found some local publishers, North Carolina and Tennessee, submitted around. And one of them in North Carolina, Redhawk Publishing, liked my stuff enough. They said, you have enough for a volume. did. So sent in everything, lots of editing, lots of pain in the butt stuff, but 6 to 8 months later, I've got a book. He comes out for my reading, and the first thing I want to do is introduce him to one of the editors, because I felt like he was getting really lazy, not putting his stuff out there, and needed to have a volume for all of his students and for everyone he's inspired. So his is out. Mine came out almost a year ago today. His came out a couple months ago, and so now we are. So it all comes full circle when you have a great teacher and a great coach that actually inspires you to do these things. Tonight we kind of have a greatest hits playlist. We tried to do it like a concert where we're going to kick it off with crowd favorites, and we've got different things that piggyback off each other, so we're going to go back and forth. Crowd favorites, then we'll segue into some stuff you guys probably don't care about because it's personal to us, and then we'll send you all home with Sweet Caroline, and everyone's going to have a good time. First thing we're going to do is poems about dads, which is important to both of us, and Father's Day was, of course, recently. And I had this bookmarked, and here we go. So, my first one, my dad was a musician. Never of any real account, but he liked to play in cover bands, and he got a song published one time, and he passed away in 2014, and as I was doing this, I was like, it'd be really cool if I took a song he got published and took like a couple lines from it, so it was like a collaboration, like all the musicians and artists do these days. So I did that, and this poem's called Cover Band, and it's all about him as a musician. So, cover band with Michael Jenkins. You never made the big time or signed a record deal, tooling instead in the fog of smoke-filled bars and private clubs, where the drunks will dance to whatever they are given. And so you gave all. At New Year's shows and Christmas parties, on Halloween in full costume, you sang, asking your audience, please accept me. For your music, for entertainment, as a double-cross star, burning outward from the stage like a beacon to your people, recreating the sounds they loved of bands they could never see, whether for money or distance, choosing instead the safety of local fairgrounds and illegal bars lost in the sticks or the hollow, to listen to you imitate and cover the anthems they knew and loved, of wild nights, the working man, and you drawing on their energy, watching them all beneath the brim of your hat, forever dancing and swearing they were witness to the real thing.
I guess this poem's like my greatest hit. I don't know, it's like at a concert, she'd have to play it all the time. My dad was really good at fixing stuff. And when I was a sophomore in high school, he takes this 1977 Ford Falcon station wagon. It's like a 3-speed on the column. I learned how to drive a shift that way. And I remember we pull up to this guy's yard, and we pull up in this guy's yard. It's been sitting in this tree. We go, my dad knocks on the door, and he asks the guy what he wants for it. And the guy, and I just like, I'll never forget this. And the guy's like, well, I'll sell it to you for $25, but it won't never run. It won't never run. I mean, I can still remember that guy saying that. And so like 10 days later, my dad fixed it. So like I drove it. I know that no girl went out with me for my car. I know that. I know that for sure. Like no girl ever went out with me. So but anyway, and then like right before he died, it was like, I don't know if we can fix that thing or not. I wanted to fix it again. But, so, this is called Falcon Dreaming. It's the first poem I got published. It got published in James Dickey Review. So, Falcon Dreaming for Red Price. Somewhere in some resting place for wrecks, I'm fairly sure it now lies lifeless. Rotten rubber overborne by weeds, cracking vinyl succumb to decay, that old 4200 forever silenced. A desk in a salvage yard schoolhouse where, in another sadly too late time, I learned from the ghost of my father. Hazy like the thick summer heat that lies captive in places like this, stark like the brisk autumn wind trapped colder in these broken shells, the lesson comes to me just now, how crawling through husks of cars in my now near spectral childhood teaches me today to see two poems. One crafted by a more adept other, one for my own halting brain. And I remember that one simple miracle wrought by the wrench of my dad, $25 worth of lifeless tin that allegedly wouldn't never run, resurrected by his hard, greasy hands to be party to driving lessons and dates, 6 more years of one thing and another, only again losing its second happy life when its savior loosed the grip on his. So often I release the wheel of my youth, but today I see clearly the words on paper, and I see the sweet, rusty old contraption, and through tears of sporadic remembrance, look on the hazy, stoic, lovely face of my father, tinkering on in the junkyard of the dead, looking for life where there should be none, and finding it, and giving it to us both.
We got any Cormac McCarthy fans in here?
Yeah.
See, as always, that's right.
Cormac was a big influence on both of us. My favorite writer of all time, one of yours, and he passed away last week. So I think it was last. Yeah, it was last week. No, it was last week. Anyway, actually, a year ago, wrote a poem about my favorite book of his called Suttree, which takes place in Knoxville in the 50s. Yeah, it's my absolute.
You're going to
favorite
UT, you
book.
got to read Suttree.
Yeah, it all takes place in the 50s in Knoxville, and it's about him giving up a life of privilege. He came from a rich family to live in a dilapidated boathouse down by the river and hang out with the drunks and the thieves and the whores and all the worst people, but finding the best things in them. And it's an amazing book. Okay, so before I read that,
We're going to read him first.
we're going to read something Cormac actually
From all the
wrote.
pretty horses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't
Okay,
really
y'all know
compete
this.
with them.
This is one of those moments. Y'all know this is one of those moments, right? Where Harold Bloom says it's Shakespearean. He's talking about when John Grady and his dad are out riding the horses. His father rode sitting forward slightly in the saddle, holding the reins in one hand, about 2 inches above the saddle horn, so thin and frail, lost in his clothes, looking over the country with those sunken eyes, as if the world out there had been altered or made suspect by what he'd seen of it elsewhere, as if he might never see it right again, or worse, did see it at last, see it as had always been, would forever be. This is the shit that is good right here. The boy who rode on slightly before him sat a horse, not only as if he'd been born to it, which he was, but as if he were begot by malice or mischance into some queer land where horses never were. He would have found them anyway. Would have known that there was something missing for the world to be right, or be right in it, and would have set forth to wander whenever it was needed, for as long as it took, until he came upon one, and he would have known that that was what he sought, and it would have been.
So good.
That's the master. I think Stephen King said he was the greatest American author. Reportedly on his deathbed, he said his one regret was he never got to hear Kincaid Jenkins and Jeff Price read. That's a shame, I know.
Who would be
but,
his biggest? Who would be bigger fans?
Yeah, exactly. So my poem is it's about him, but it's also about the book Suttree. So a lot of the characters and places is in this. If you haven't read it, you might be a little bit lost, but just you'll get the gist of it. So it's called Old Suttree is Dead. Oh, buddy, your city is gone, has give way to modern amenities. The shoreline of your house now overrun by restaurants and parking lots. The homes of your friends and neighbors cleared away like vagrants in the night. And they, those souls who tested and sustained you, are found dead now, interred in the cemeteries and nameless graves and deep in the very depths of the Tennessee River these many years since. What has become of the Huddle, the S&W, Gold Sun Cafe, the Regus or Market House? All gone now, sitting vacant or worse, consumer chains and fine dining. Your world pulled from existence and replaced by a procession of shops and hotels and venues which lay the foundation for a new skyline, complete with artificial sun shining over the beams and girders and scaffolding rising up like the city's exposed bones, broken and misshapen over time, and reset with modern apathy, upon whose new blood bricks you would not recognize, merely more for you to escape from. Oh, you would not find it easier to drink here, no longer concealing the cheap slow whiskey when beer flows so freely. J-Bone's early times, the best little drink in the world, is replaced by local craft breweries and a high-gravity tavern you yourself bore, and your good-natured drinkers, always quick with a smile or a fist, have been replaced by such further vices taken in the very corners where Harrogate himself may have lived. Worse fate than watermelons found here. For the dregs you dwelled have been dragged to further depths you would deem unbearable. But if you squint, you can still see the faint remnants of your home, the aisle arches of Henley Street Bridge, curving like the city spine, that damned university ever growing, the impoverished culture of McAnally Flats, still thriving in the face of society, and your river, the city's precious lifeblood churning, still pouring in travelers, still bending like a lover's embrace, still full of all the fish you will never catch. Somewhere in the green walk by the river is a newly minted park bearing your name. And along the paths and obstacles lives the new city and a future generation born. Their work is vast and ever-changing. I have seen them with my own eyes, walking towards a dream of hope and such progress unbearable. Fly them too.
So he got lucky. He put out 2 books, like one in September, one in
Before he died.
right before he died. His last 2 books. And I'm not sure if this was Providence or not, but the second book, Stella Maris, was like easy not to get lost in because it was therapy sessions between 2 characters. But he doesn't use punctuation because he says that punctuation is a waste of time if you're a writer.
It crowds the page.
Yeah, it crowds the page. And my kids hate it. It drives them crazy because they have to work because it makes them work. Right? That's what it really
To see who
is
said
like.
what.
Yeah, and all that stuff. But it has to work. So that day he died, I had 50, 60 some pages of Stella Maris left to read. So I went out on the back porch and I got some beer and I finished the book. To wait for the maestro. Even as you learn to endure the slaughter McCarthy describes, you become accustomed to the book's high style, again, as overtly Shakespearean as it is Faulknerian. This is like Shakespeare and Faulkner, right? Harold Bloom on Blood Meridian. Picked Stella Maris up last week, having put it down in January, 50 some odd pages from the end, resolved to finally finish it up, but moved on to some other thing, one in a legion of summer whims that is quite easily lost in the tide of early June's promised crammed air. Today it plays like true design. It's not like the day Yeats left, not dead of winter disappearance, no cold, gray, dark one for you. You got a perfect Tennessee day. Blue and breezy, brimming with light and the siren song of summer. That sort's better with me at least. 68 pages left. I love the lack of punctuation, mostly for the simple reason that it makes my kids crazy. Because it requires harder work, which is Shakespearean in itself, as it beckons us to lift ourselves at odds with the dull mainstream that would dummy everything down. Besides, it's a pretty simple task to distinguish Elisa from Cohen. And all writers know you weren't wrong. Quotation marks are a waste of time. 34 pages left. I'm all set for the rereads, beginning with John Joel Glanton and the hulking, horrific Holden. I thought about scouring Suttree first, but since it was my gateway drug to you, greatest of our time, it might be fitting if it was the last. 22 pages left. But now the time is upon me, realizing that within this hour I will have read your final words, treating this like some grand cliffhanger, unsure of what I'll find at the end. Knowing that Alicia isn't John Grady, a kid I know as well as any. I've tried to mentor over the years. And that Cohen isn't Billy Parham, trying to the end to save his friend. And knowing that this world of mine will forever be a slightly lesser place, bereft of any more of your brilliance. Your ability to take words and ideas and transport us all to a better place, if only for a moment now and then.
This guy I wrestled with and coached.
Where's Waylon?
This is a Waylon Lowe poem. Waylon was one of those guys who was had all the gifts in the world and all the athleticism and talent, but he was a complete bonehead. Just a great wrestler, but he made the stupidest decisions. And he also, he upset me because he always got by on good looks, charisma, and F grades, and it upset me that someone could do that in life. And I was young, but he could wrestle. And this was actually, of all the poems in my book, this is the oldest one. You go back to the ones you wrote in high school, college, and usually cringe because they're really not good. This is one that Coach liked, so I included it in here. And it was also one of the first moments where you study poetry and you're writing papers on poetry and all this, but the first time you actually see something that you're like, I just witnessed poetry. That's poetry in motion thing, something that actually inspires you to go write your own thing. And that's kind of what this was for me. And then Coach will have a follow-up to this one. So mine's called Waylon at the Battle of Greenville. This was when we wrestled them one night. He lived on breaths we never took, with lungs pumping hot fire through his mouth, outlining his veins, running the course of his body, spewing forth from his reach and step. I was watching the day he threw that kid, locked together like a hinge turning over in my mind. I was breathing the same air that day, but my lungs churned little fire. The crowd gasped that same air, but not one of them came alive. Maybe we didn't have the bellows stirring like he had in his soul, only smokestacks releasing all that we could have been. Waylon seemed bottled up, a corked fire building and fighting to be released. He tossed that kid. We all saw him do it. Reached from a line that I never crossed. It wasn't anything to him, simply adding a coal or two to a flame that has grown beyond my view and will not die out. What I would have given to have lungs like his. I long to spew fire.
Charles Bukowski wrote this poem called Betting on the Muse, and he talks about, it starts out with like all these athletes who died and they faded away. Let's put it that way. And he said, that's why I chose to become a writer, because if you're worth a half a damn, you can keep knocking them out of the park till the last day, till the last minute. And so that was the inspiration for this poem that I wrote. This poem's a kind of response to, because it was a miracle. Waylon threw that kid. It's a freaking miracle. Like, it's one of them things, like, it happens once in like 1,000 matches. And he was like that. I mean, the kid could wrestle, but he was like clueless. But, and
He's on TMZ's website.
yeah, don't even start. So this is called Fire, Miracle, and Love, because there's a lot of fire imagery in that other poem, and there's a miracle, and so the tale has lived for a brief decade now, because it's a lot longer than
It's in the
that.
90s. She
It's
had
a
to be
lot
there.
longer than that now. One miracle seared in my memory, maybe infused with more power today, because of one who saw and wrote it down. So that the mind's images did fade, the words would raise it again from the ash to live again and burn me with its light. But its bard makes a truly grave mistake to believe that he was bereft of flame, since he had fire of a different kind, built from a scene that only happened once, never to transpire in quite the same way, whose luminescence might forever wane if it had not been captured on a page and passed around like hot and tiny sparks to spread the glory of its principles. A story kindling now at least 3 fires, one for the thrower who authored the scene, a second for the bard who wrote it down, a third one for the teacher of them both. whose conflagration blazes brighter still, because it will be stoked eternally with bellows spewing forth a threefold love. One held for the most excellent of sports, a second for the raw fire of the word, a third for both the thrower of the bard. And as one battle follows on the next, that moment will stand as one of the best, a song of fire, miracle, and love that demon dissolution cannot steal. Beer! We tried to get this like into more pleasant things, so we're going from Wayland to beer to dogs.
We'll end with dogs because everybody. So beer. I was going to read the one about the brewery that actually got me kickstarted on this, but I'm going to read a different one instead. Anybody that wants to read that one can read it later. This one's called The Ritual. When you take your seat at the communal bar, you enter into a contract with all other patrons. For the pouring of beer is like the breaking of bread, requiring you to briefly be friends or enemies by the pint. And you must listen to each other, telling things no one really wants to hear, or watch the games with either fanaticism or feigned interest, discuss or argue, meet someone new, learn names that will soon be forgotten, numbers entered incorrectly, for in this world it is best to never drink alone when the alternative is drinking with others. Drinking with others.
So sidetracked at Morganton made Kate a beer for his book release.
And then he stole my thunder and got your brewery.
So my buddy Marty Vellis, who's like the most amazing brewmaster ever, I called Marty and I'm like, I might get a book published, and if I do, you got to make me a beer. And Marty said, okay. And so I did. And so I went to Marty. And so he made my beer. I'm like, I've only got like 4 left. And I texted him the other day and said, did you make some more? It's a Maybach. Did you make some more of that Maybach? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, shit. Because I've got some, I had to buy 100 decals. And the renter's back there somewhere, John and Sarah, like the day I went up to Fanatics Brewery, it was Marty's Brewery, and we did a signing there, and we canned a bunch of the beer, and then we blew the keg. So it was 30 gallons of beer, so we canned like 10 gallons, then we blew the keg. And then but I wrote a poem for Marty and for Fanatic Brewing. It's called A World So Filled, for Fanatic Brewing. Mark Hurd was right. Love is not the only thing, but it's the best thing. So let's start there. God loves us. I'm a bastard, but God loves me anyway. Then there is the love of lovers, loved ones, friends, husbands, wives, kids, and a dog's love. Unsullied, unconditional, as close to perfect as can be offered. Then there's the love of books, the sublime of the written word, to hold them in our hands, smell an old copy of a great one, gaze upon the pictures they paint, the songs they weave when read aloud, those tiny tastes of beauty they unfold before us. But beer. It completes the spell that releases the magic of any remarkable day. Some, I need to have a beer song. Big Head Todd or Crew Ongbin laying down the soundtrack, then gripping the glass, watching the bubbles rise in a clear golden kolsch, the sweet, earthy fragrance of a dry-hopped pale ale, the bliss of that first taste of a mighty, malty Maybach, replete with joy and promise, spring's advent and winter's death, and unalloyed memories. These things make that world that Coleridge wrote about, one so filled that it is impossible not to love. Dogs.
All right, we got dogs coming up now.
I said there would be poems about dogs. You going first or not?
You can go first. I'm trying to find one.
My old dog Cooper was 15 when he died. And so I've got Buddy now, and I've got Obi, who I fostered. And Buddy and Obi, I honestly believe, are two of the best things I've ever done in my life. And people argue with me, but I think dogs are better than us at everything that matters. And like people say, what? How do you know that? And I'm like, they live in the moment, and they love unconditionally. And what else is there, right? So when Cooper died, I swear to God this happened. I'm not making this up just so I could write a poem. Cooper died the night, I had Cooper for 13 years, and when he died, the night he died, he came to me in a dream the night he died. And I swear I'm not. So I'm going to read this. At odd times, my dead visit me in dreams, and uncritically I pass time with them, not pausing nor choosing until waking to acknowledge the incongruity, that the strange sense of surreal, skewed existence that carries itself as insouciantly as an old trusted friend through my slumbers, as sure as breathing or blinking or thought. And while grief may, like a shifty, false friend, attempt to ambush me with its despairs, I never fall to its embittered blows, because some wise loved one assured me once that when we dream of those we truly loved, who've gone ahead of us through that last door, it is not a malign visitation, rather a message born to us in love to tell us that their spirits are in peace. I'm going to try not to cry. So instead of revisiting my pain, I take kind comfort in our good fortune. I did not deserve Cooper. So with the loyalty bred in your kind, you visited me at dreams that very night, just hours since you took your final breath and crossed the bridge into the summerland, standing behind the deck in our backyard. And with a younger dog's pluck and panache, you bade your goodbye, full-throated and true in your hound's voice, that song distinct to you, your body hale, robust, and vigorous, just like you were when you first came to me. The ravages of age all washed away, your chestnut spots no longer shot with white, arthritis gone, eyesight restored, boundless, long and loud you called out, letting me know that you'd been welcomed to that paradise, that it was just as its adherents claimed, a place pain and suffering held no sway, that you were at peace, and I should be too.
So I've got several dog poems. My dogs are my world. Love them more than anything. Anytime I think back on any mistakes I've made or regrets or past relationships, I always think, if I could go back and change that, would it mean that I don't end up with these dogs? And I always think because of that, I don't recant any of my past mistakes. They all led me to them. So the poem I'm going to do is, if you have fluffy, hairy dogs like I do, you always have hair all over you, no matter where you are. It's called Hair of the Dog, which also fits in with the whole drinking motif. I carry you with me in all things, for unknowingly you are woven into the very fibers of my clothes, having taken root around the strings of my shoes, curling from my shirt and pants like an undiagnosed malady. I wear you now, gathered in the hallway like tumbleweed, clumped in corners to resemble soft, unformed brethren, growing between the very buttons of my phone like living circuitry. I mail you to faraway lands and packages, and there you scatter at play in the city streets, those rolling fields you will never run. An inch of you covers my car interior, stirring as I drive, windows down, to drift on the town at large. I find you afloat in the surface of the bath. I find you in my pockets and I am richer. I find you in my mouth and I smile. I pull at your string and I marvel at your color and length. Once brown, here gray, a golden strand, the occasional whisker. Searching all day, brushing aside, never finding all of you until in a testament to love, I come home, I collect more. I think that was it for a back and
That was
forth. You
like
had a
the back
couple
and
you wanted to
forth.
read,
I got
and I had a couple
two that I want to for sure read. before
separate
we
now.
run out of time. What's our time?
It is 7:54.
We good.
I don't know how when you started exactly. I think it was like,
7:05,
It was late.
17.
you said 7:10.
I gotta read these two. You get
Yeah.
it?
I might do one or
It
two.
is a non-emergent situation.
Y'all
You can
okay?
read
We're gonna
really
close
fast.
this
Are y'all
place down.
okay? You don't have to lie. You can lie. I mean, you know me. You can tell the truth. You don't read.
Currently live.
Okay.
I guess, yeah. It's like
This is a like when like it was funny like this whole thing about getting the book together because in the '90s and I was out in Jefferson County, which is a hideous place, and I can't even want to start.
I didn't
Well, you
for
you went to
intellectuals.
Carson Newman.
Yeah.
I lived there. Like, okay, and so you know, so I wrote a lot of poetry, and I thought it was good, and it was funny when I was putting the book together because I'd find something, and I'm like, oh my God, Julie's like, what is that? And I brought it up and throw it away.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to see it.
Terrible.
Okay, so I started this notebook for Julie when we first got married because like I went through the point where I didn't write as many poems because I was happy. So, so Julie, so this is this will be our 25th anniversary in July.
The very first poem I ever read publicly, I read at their wedding. So that was, they forced me, like a young 17-year-old shy kid, to read at their wedding.
So Julie, our first Valentine's Day was like, we'd had a really good run of wrestling teams at Jeff County. And then we were kind of in this decline. And we went to the regional tournament and like had the worst finish we've ever had. And it was awful. It was like a real, like, there's kids here, but it was a show and there's a word in front of it that I won't talk about. So, but like whenever things, I hate to lose. I'm not pathological. I was never pathological about it. I just hated losing. You know, I just hated it. And I'd rather have a bunch of kids that hate to lose than kids that want to win because everybody wants to win. So anyway, I wrote a poem on our 25th Valentine's Day the poem's about like never having to deal with that crap by yourself anymore. But I didn't know. But this is our first Valentine's Day. So this is for Julie. On that day 25 quick years ago, I hadn't managed to doff the gray cloak that life and so many wan poems and songs had spent so much time tailoring for me. That day, bittersweet itself in its flesh. At one end, my boys failed to succeed, but the other end, you came home with me and negated the certain sad malaise that lay in wait each time things ended wrong. And I'd go back to a still, darkened house and left alone to ponder it with me. And though we were together in the dark, you gave me light that drove off my heartbreak. But what I couldn't know that Valentine's was that night was both end and beginning. The death of facing heartbreak on my own, all disappointment, tempered with the still that you would be there with me, win or lose.
So for my last couple, I was debating on what to do, just that didn't tie into anything. I was going to do a couple political poems, but those are divisive and you never know what you're going to get. So I'm going to instead do 2 Johnson City poems. This one I wrote after this guy's 60th birthday a couple years ago. It's called The 60-Year Pilgrimage. They have traveled from afar and through time to be here. Relatives and friends, students and more, knowing milestones are harder to come by these days. Along the track he is adorned with gifts from each stop, a walking stick to begin, a shirt to mark the occasion, balloons to announce his arrival, a bandana to signify a location, until he looks made up like a vagabond passing through the lives of each of us as either an athlete, teacher, poet warrior, servant of God, purveyor of justice, whatever we may have needed. And I realized hearing the stories of his youth, of his growth, of his misadventures into chaos, of times I would not recognize him, that I cannot say I knew him, only that I knew him when. And the last one just came to me as we were at, what's that bar? Mulligan's? Was it Mulligan's? Yeah. Really cool place.
Spend money at Mulligan's, they put
Yeah.
our signs up.
Oh, after this, we're going for a beer.
Some
there.
people will like take my sign and go, would you put this up? And they go, yeah, and then they didn't put it up. That's kind of messed up.
So the bartender there is from Ireland, from Dublin, and we were talking to him about movies and stuff. And we told him we had a poetry reading tonight, and he was interested. So I pulled up this poem that I wrote about Dublin when I was there, and this was written after a long hangover. And he's like, I can totally relate to that. So he really liked this, and I was like, it's perfect for tonight. So Dublin. Dublin on waking is like a city in recovery, reflecting the previous night through street cleaners churning refuse, sleeping bums turning over, laddered workers reaching up to paint what has come undone, to fix the cracks in the city stemmed from lobbed bottles, ledges and weathered ruin falling all around their feet. These morning hours they toil, for soon the city will breathe deeply, will lash awake like a constrained athlete or tuned instrument breaking silence. And they will take their ladders and stop their machines and join in living with their excesses. For only before waking does Dublin live, a city in repose. I'm done.
Okay, got one more. Last one's for my kid. I call him. I hope they don't think that's like a term of derision, because it's not a term of derision. But a lot of my kids are here tonight, like from way back in the day. I became an Episcopalian about 4 or 5 years ago. I'm a recovering Baptist, and got really interested in the concept of sacraments because I'm really interested in the concept of grace because I need it so much. And the old Baptist preachers though would say stuff like grace is unmerited favor, and it always made a lot of sense to me because it's something you don't deserve, right? And so this year, like I'm trying to think, like at the end of the year, my kids start bringing me stuff, right? So Quinn McSpadden made me a ceramic holy hand grenade of Antioch. And you're like, what? I mean, and like the time that he spent on it, and the time that he put into it, and it's just humbling for me.
Probably spent 1, 2, 5, 3. So
There. So this last poem is called Armor. It started 2 decades ago when a shy, troubled girl took my yellow school bus and turned it into a sort of tour bus for some 60s steep bards, peace signs and sunshine, starry nights and good energy, combining to scream loud love like a bright, benevolent banshee, a talisman and inspired, yet humble. There had been others before, mostly diverse works of art. There was a life-size Spider-Man, the juvenilia of a tattoo artist, an Iron Man from the hand of a burgeoning graphic designer, a dwarf on a careening surfboard, fleeing the maw of a hungry serpent, countless renderings of war penguins, an army of my power animal. That same affection manifested itself in so many remarkable ways. The Dickens tin filled with wisdom, a pair of grinning, japeless Yoriks, a veritable collection of ceramics, holy grails, fortresses, vases, even a topper-colored war penguin, a mug dedicated to Falstaff, posters of Dickey and Kerouac, and a veritable mob of stuffed creatures. But it was only 7 days ago, musing on the gifts of this year's kids, that the real epiphany came. Some still small Damascus Road voice there to chide my bald obliviousness. Compounding the great sad inventory of my teeming trove of unmerited favor, the stout building stones of legacy, So many things I never counted on when I set out on this work God gave me. Now, they show they know me by their offerings. 2 took extreme care of my 3 small plants, myself a hopeless duffer at the task. Another brought a candle for next year, one with a scent that makes this space unique. Of course, one brings a book close to her heart, and this time I'll follow in her footsteps. The rest, seizing on my penchant for battles, have armed me like some comic ill-made knight. A wizard Funko Cartman at my back. A fine $5 foam Excalibur, and words, so many, so strong, like the rings that make a shirt of stoutest Smithville chain. And as if that kit was insufficient to guarantee a win in any fight, one supplies me with God's own ordinance, a dread ceramic holy hand grenade. So I stand, attired in this great wonder, and muse upon what I guess is their love, pondering their offerings for what they are, to me, the most humbling of sacraments, replete with sublime, unmerited favor, and love them for their unpretentious grace, their affection for this old curmudgeon, cantankerous, but always on their side, swearing on their gifts to champion them, to best honor the love they bring to me.
We have time for a couple of questions if anybody has any. This is a great opportunity to put your teacher on the spot instead of the other way around. I have been thinking of that joke the whole time, and I have to say it. So,
When's your birthday?
July 24th.
July. That's a little soon.
So now that you know that,
I'll celebrate it at one time sometime.
I think we answered most of the Q&A about
yeah.
how we know each other, how we saw
Kaylee.
P&B and
You
whatnot.
said be sane in a text message earlier. What would you define as sane?
one rare magical item, 3 others that like make you better at what you do but don't unbalance the game. It's Tomb of Horrors and you're in trouble anyway, so it doesn't matter. We're gonna do anybody wants to come take pictures, it's gonna be like a horror show. On July 11th, a bunch of us are gonna open mulligans and close mulligans. I'm gonna run Tomb of Horrors, Kaylee and Ben and anybody else here? Kaylee and Ben and 4 other people, Ben and Russell Minatel and some other guys, so we're gonna run Tomb of Horrors. So, yeah.
Have you written any poems about your child's person?
Ooh, good question.
Did you throw those away? Or those were...
Well, see, I didn't start writing poems till
Of
like.
course, I'm poem here, but
Do you really?
yeah,
You didn't go to
I didn't go, but
I did.
found
No, I don't think so.
Oh my goodness.
What? What?
Was it not an important moment in your life? Those 4 years where they
Man, like Carson,
Just blew my
God, I don't even want to talk about that. Oh, that was such a that was such a land of confusion.
have you
Both Turners, both Dr.
I never had Miss Turner. She retired. I had Dr. That we had Lisa and I went to college together. Dr. R.R. Turner was probably like one person in the world. The world is a worse place because he's not in it.
Absolutely. Exactly.
He was amazingly. He's the one that like got me into Walt Whitman. Like I had an American Lit class. You know, where you find out whether it's like Pepsi and Coke or Walt Whitman or Emily Dickinson. You know, and he kind of, and Sinclair Lewis got me into, like, he's got me reading by myself. Like Elmer Gantry, great, the best maybe first line of any book, Elmer Gantry was drunk. He was eloquently drunk, lovingly and pugnaciously drunk. He was a preacher, by the way. So, yeah. I could write. I'm going to write a poem about Dr. Turner. Coming into class with an apple, and he says, "I've been singing this apple's praises all the way up the sidewalk." And he did a Robert Frost poem where we don't cut apples right, and Dr. Turner cut the apples right. This Robert Frost poem, he cut the apples right and brought us apples to class. I had a friend drop out of school. I'm going to shut up after this. I had a friend drop out of school and go all the way back to Texas. And this is back before cell phones and all that crap. This is in the 80s. Dr. Turner found him. Brian, Coach Nelson. And he found him. And like, if you want to I've talked to people, and if you want to get the rest of your stuff turned in and everything and send it in. And one last Dr. Turner story. I go in his room and there's stacks of papers. Like stacks of, I'm not talking like that, I'm talking like stacks of papers. And this is 2 years after I've had him. I'm teaching in Jeff County. So I decided I'm gonna go up there one day and see who's there. And I roll in and Dr. Turner's there. He's like, "Oh, Mr. Price." He's like, "I have a paper of yours." And he turns around and he kind of looks at the stacks, then he goes, and he reaches in and he pulls this paper out that I've written like 2 years ago. And I was like, "How did you do that?" But you know, he got me because he was Walt Whitman. I mean, Walt Whitman was like my gateway drug into poetry. And so I had a kid this year who we read a Walt Whitman poem, and she said, "This is what poetry is supposed to be." And I was like, yeah, because it's complex but accessible and inclusive and okay, I'm done.
Well, he's like unconditional love. He's like a dog, you know?
Yeah, he is, yeah.
He
He's
was like the only people we should aspire to be like are like him and dogs.
He loves everything. So when he talks about the atmosphere and he goes, "I'm going to become undisguised and naked. I'm mad for it to be like the air. I'm mad for it to be in contact with me." Like if you're outside today, you're like, "Man, I wish I could take my shirt off."
I always call him Pat Bottle. I sometimes think it's funny.
Have,
All right, everybody.
have your students seen pictures of you in college?
Yes.
He has like long, beautiful, black, fair
I was
frosted
pretty.
feathered hair. Like parted in the middle.
I was pretty.
Yeah. Ask him to look sometime. He's got it.
I gotta see those photos.
Yeah, he's
You
got
not
it.
see? I put those pictures up in class. My senior year pictures. Yeah. Girls loved them.
Yeah.
You put it up and someone said, "Who's that? He's hot."
And then 5 minutes later, she said,
Uh-oh, it's me. Uh-oh.
she's like, "What have I done?"
I messed up.
All right. Well, once more, hats off to everybody for coming out.
Thank you,
hats off to
guys.
our amazing
Very
readers. This is a fantastic crowd. I'm so happy that you all got to come be here. If you want to pick up a book and get it signed, then you can come right on up here, and we can take cash and card. And if not, I hope you have a great rest of your night.
I'm going to go pee first. Okay?
Yeah.
Wait, I'll be right back. Bye, Kate. Bye.
Right there.
Yeah, we're gonna go to the restroom.
If somebody doesn't, just
That's why I have to say it, because I am crazy.